In life, you're either swimming, treading water, or drowning at any day, any moment, any situation, anything, okay? So you need to look at your life and you need to determine, what am I doing right now? Am I just treading water and just like doing this job and just kind of complaining and just like not really making that next dynamic leap to whatever comes next, right? Am I just fully drowning where like my life is falling apart and I'm just like completely in the gutter? Or am I swimming? Like, what are you doing?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to Path Found. This is the podcast where we unpack the winding, messy, and meaningful journeys that lead to the work we love and a life that feels right. I'm Monica Argandonian, and each week I'm going to sit down with someone whose path didn't follow a straight line, but it still led them to purpose and fulfillment and often surprising success. These are real conversations about mentorship, pivots, networking, self-doubt, mistakes that we all make, and what it means to find direction when the map runs out. These stories are here to inspire and guide you. We'll dig into the things school didn't teach, like how to navigate career twists, life lessons, and big transitions. If you like what you hear, please share the podcast with a friend, subscribe, and leave us a review. You can also find us on Instagram at PathFound Podcast or online at KeystoneNetwork.org. There you can send in your comments, suggest guests or topics, or even apply to be a guest yourself. This podcast is for you, my students, my peers, and anyone figuring it out as they go. As a longtime teacher and anthropologist, I've always believed in the power of stories. They remind us we're not alone and that it's okay to change your mind, take a different route, or still be unsure of what comes next. This is my pivot too, and so I'm glad to have you on this journey with me. Now let's get started. Today at Path Found, I'm here with my cousin Michael, a veteran, entrepreneur, and lifelong seeker of purpose. From growing up in Los Angeles with privilege and uncertainty to a wake-up call in community college to serving as an Army Ranger in Iraq, Michael's journey is one of resilience, reinvention, and redefining what it means to serve. Today, he's the co-founder of Level Up Solutions, a company dedicated to supporting people with developmental disabilities. His story is about navigating failure, finding mentors, making pivotal choices, and building a life rooted in service and meaning. So obviously, Michael, I've known you your whole life.
Absolutely.
But I know you and I don't know you. I know kind of where you started and where you ended up, but I know that there has been definitely lots of different side turns along that journey. And so I'm looking forward to this conversation and talking with you today and having you share your story with everybody. And so I'm going to start just by asking, what were you like in high school?
Yeah. Well, first and foremost, thank you so much for inviting me to speak on your podcast. Obviously, one of my favorite cousins, and the way that we grew up together, you know, it's kind of a 10-year age difference. And so you really were kind of like an older sister to me and would babysit me. And we spent a lot of great moments together when we were young. But yeah, so gosh, what was I like? You know, it seems like yesterday, and yet it also seems like such a long time ago. But, you know, I grew up in an upper middle class, suburban Los Angeles household. I was the youngest of four, two super loving parents. And when I was young, I would say that I was probably a little lackadaisical, and perhaps not completely focused on, you know, school as much as I was on sports and friends. I think, you know, growing up with privilege and with the perception of wealth, going to the best schools, having the best tools and resources available to me, and yet also floundering at times due to a lack of focus, a lack of, you know, just consistency. And so I would say that as a kid, I was kind of head in the clouds, you know, didn't really understand the realities of the world, didn't understand how I needed to apply myself, focus. I was kind of an average to below student, even though I was going to some of the best Catholic schools in Los Angeles. I would, you know, often blow off reading assignments in school to go read stuff that I wanted to read. And so a lot of just not really having clear goals and motivation and the focus, I think, at the time to really understand what was expected of me in terms of my life and my family's expectations. Yeah, so kind of a happy-go-lucky kid, but perhaps not as focused as I should have been at that age.
So I think there is a misconception that, you know, you did have privilege and you did go to these great schools. And so that automatically would have led you to the right path and doing these things you're supposed to. You had your dad's a lawyer. So you definitely had, you know, that background of what to do, right? How to apply for college and choosing majors and things like that. Whereas, you know, my dad didn't even graduate high school and he did well for himself. He was great. But man, we grew up so differently and yet, you know, in the same family. family.
Yeah.
And so I look to your dad as a mentor. I mean, he was really important in my life. Do you think having like maybe those higher expectations, like what happened? Like why was it just school? Were you just not built that way?
Yeah, I think it was a combination of a lot of things. I think definitely had some non-diagnosed ADHD, so mild ADHD as a kid that wasn't, I don't think addressed. This was the late 80s, early 90s, and I think that was not something that I got an official diagnosis until my adult years. I think at the time, my dad and my mom both, they were so focused on the day-to-day raising us and providing for us, and I, being the youngest, I think contributed to this as well, of just kind of needing more of a mentor to say, okay, do this, do that, sit down and read this chapter, review this chapter. I think I was more of somebody that I was given all the tools and I was given all of the opportunities, but I wasn't given perhaps a roadmap to success in order to sit down and kind of get stuff done. So I think that was a part of it. I think also I was surrounded by, students that were much more intellectually capable than me. And so I did kind of have that imposter syndrome going on where I'm like, wow, these people are all really smart and they're all getting straight A's with super little effort. And I was kind of struggling through some of the academic side of the house. And so I think there was a little bit of that going on as well. And I think it's also just natural. I think at that age, regardless of your socioeconomic background, you go through that kind of floundering phase where you're not really sure. I remember, there'd be times when I would get feedback or advice from people and I didn't even want to listen because I was stubborn and because I thought I knew better. And I also didn't necessarily want to live the life of my peers. I didn't necessarily see myself as being, I've always, I guess, considered myself more of an outlier. Maybe it's the Mexican Irish, or maybe it's, not having this pedigreed. A lot of my friends were like second and third generation, coming from these very, very wealthy, established, families in Los Angeles. And so I think maybe it was a little bit of that as well, where I thought, I don't know if I really want to do this. I don't know if I want to be an attorney. I don't know if I want to go to grad school right after college and get a house. And, by the time I'm 25 or 26 and have a mortgage and a family, I always thought that I wanted a slightly different life than my peers. And I thought that maybe, that went into the thought process as well.
So it was always expected you'd go to college.
Absolutely. Yeah, it wasn't forced on us in any way, shape, or form. My father's and my mother have provided for all of me and my siblings' education all the way through my master's that I earned, 5 years ago during COVID. And so, but it was definitely an expectation. But my parents were very supportive in whatever we wanted to do. I remember my dad used to tell me, whatever you do, just do it well. He's like, it doesn't matter what you do. It certainly wasn't an expectation. But then again, I followed my father into the army. My brother followed my father into the legal field. And so he definitely was a mentor in that way, but certainly no expectations to do what he did.
So after high school, you go where? What do you decide?
Yeah, so after high school, I went to an all-male Jesuit high school in Los Angeles. And again, just was kind of a below average student. So as a lot of my buddies were going off to Berkeley and Columbia and Georgetown, I did not get into any colleges. So I did all my applications and I did not get into any four-year universities. And so I was like, okay, now what am I going to do? And so I ended up going to a community college up in San Luis Obispo. There was one other guy from my high school who lived on the west side, and he was kind of like this surfer guy. And we didn't really know each other all that well, but we kind of paired up and we're like, all right, let's do this and let's go be roommates. And so, yeah, I went up to San Luis Obispo and I went to Cuesta College. At that point, I, didn't really know what I wanted to do. I kind of chose my major and my academic, kind of classes based on what I didn't like. So I knew I wasn't really a math guy. I knew I wasn't a science guy. And so I naturally gravitated more towards like English and history and that kind of thing. So I became an English major and a political science minor. Did 2 years in San Luis Obispo, was still not a fully functioning frontal lobe adult and still was making, at that point, making bad decisions, drinking alcohol, smoking cigarettes at that time. Recreational marijuana use was something that was in my life. And so, I'm 18, 19 years old and I'm living away from home for the first time, but yet I also still have the privilege of, my parents gave me a car, they gave me a gas card, they paid for my credit card bills. And so I was kind of pretending to adult. I was kind of in this in-between place where I thought I was being an adult, but I was in fact a super immature young person. Ended up getting into some trouble, legal trouble while I was up there. So I was around a group of individuals who basically got into a big fight. I was grabbed along with a group of people that I was living with in a dorm at the time, and all of us were arrested at the time, taken into custody. I ended up having that become an issue because I ended up taking a lie detector test that I passed. My parents helped me by getting me an attorney, and I was able to, not suffer any long-term effects of that. But that was kind of the first moment that was really the wake-up call for me at the time. So, 19 years old, get arrested with the guys that I'm living with, have to go through this entire legal process for the first time. And that was kind of my first wake-up call. So 2 years into that experience, after that whole legal process played itself out, all the charges were dropped. I ended up going home. I then lived at home for a year and just kind of reset at that point. 19 years old, moved back in with my parents. At that point, feeling like a pretty big failure, feeling like all of my buddies at this point are entering their third year of undergrad work at, pristine colleges. I'm coming off of a community college. I got good grades, but I was still getting into trouble and I was still making bad decisions. And so then all of a sudden I'm back home living under my parents' roof again, where most all of my friends are off at college. So that was kind of a big, reset moment for me. I was feeling like a failure at that point. And I just started looking at what my options were and what I was going to do. Started going to Glendale Community College. So right down the street from where I live right now. I went to a year at community college. And at that point, I was just trying to figure out, okay, what do I want to do? I always knew that I was going to do something that helped people. That was always an early goal of mine, is to help people in some way, shape, or form. I also knew that I was going to do something more outdoorsy. I knew I wasn't going to sit in an office all day. I knew I wasn't going to be somebody that was like Mr. Businessman. So I wanted a hardworking outdoor job where I could help people. So my natural inclination at the time was to think fire services, fire department, and to become a firefighter. That's kind of a generic thing that a lot of young boys think about, when they're young, is I want to be a police officer, I want to be a firefighter. But that's what I did. And so I started to do all the prereqs to look into the fire academy and to see if that was an option for me. I remember I was sitting at home, my third year of community college at two different colleges, all of these legal issues behind me. I was 20 years old. So this is, right before Y2K and all that, right around the turn of the millennium. And I was sitting in my parents' den late at night. And I think a flip was switched inside of me. And I decided, all right, I'm going to apply to colleges and I'm going to apply to a bunch of different colleges. So I sat there, I applied to a bunch of different colleges. And one of the colleges that I applied to was University of Hawaii. And I did not know a single person that was in Hawaii. I still had a desire to get outside of, kind of the world that I had grown up in and explore the world and kind of go see things for myself. And so I dropped an application to the University of Hawaii at one night about 11 at night. And I got a letter back saying that I got admitted and that they were offering me in-state tuition. And I remember the next morning I went to my parents and I said, hey, I applied to some schools. They were probably hoping I was going to go to, USC or, Pepperdine or something like that. And I said, yeah, I'm going. I got into the University of Hawaii. And they're like, whoa, okay. And I think at the time they probably thought I wanted to go there and screw around and just, go party and, go be a beach bum or whatever. But we did have some ties to Hawaii. I remember they weren't exactly thrilled at the idea at first. They thought, gosh, where are you going to live? It's going to be expensive. But they were okay with it. And they said, okay, you got in-state tuition, go ahead. And so it's probably they thought it's better than me, living at home and going to Glendale City as a 21-year-old. So I ended up transferring out to the University of Hawaii. This is my third year of college. And then I transferred out there in August of 2001. And I thought, okay, this is my first big kind of pivot moment, put all of those first couple years of college behind me and really be able to stand on my own 2 feet. So moved out to Oahu and ended up living in Waikiki. All of a sudden, my fortunes had changed dramatically. And I go from, 2 years earlier, getting arrested and being at a community college and floundering to all of a sudden, being a 21-year-old living in a condo in Waikiki and in Hawaii. And I knew at that point that, I couldn't screw this up. I had to demonstrate to my parents and to myself and everyone around me that I was up for this challenge and that I had what it took to make it happen. So yeah, that was August of 2001. At the time, I was an English major and a political science minor. I remember thinking I wanted to be a firefighter. I remember thinking I wanted to be an elementary school teacher or that I was going to do something outdoorsy. I never had a problem. Like I thought I could be a mailman. I thought I could be, a government job where I'm outdoors, I'm getting steady pay, I have benefits, I have insurance. I was always very much of that mindset of like, I want to have a steady paycheck. I don't want some job where I have to worry about, where my next paycheck's coming from. Yeah. So that took us up to August of 2001. And then less than a month later, woke up one morning on a Tuesday and it was about 4 a.m. Hawaii time and the phone rings and I pick it up and it's my mom. And she said, did you see what they did? And I go, Mom, what are you talking about? It's 4 a.m. here. And she said, turn on the TV. So I went in the living room, turned the TV on, and of course saw the September 11th attacks and everything that had occurred there. Didn't see it live. It had all already occurred, but, sat there at that point as a 21-year-old. And I remember saying to my parents, I'm going to join the military. Told my parents on the phone. My mom was, of course, very upset, did not want me to join the military. I remember my dad saying, you're going to do what you're going to do. I can't stop you, but if you're going to go into the military, at least do it as an officer. My dad was an enlisted guy in Vietnam. He served one combat deployment. He was injured in combat. And so he said, look, if you're going to do it as an officer. The pay's better. There's more responsibility. You're going to learn more. So yeah, so I went into the University of Hawaii ROTC, the Army ROTC office the next morning, met a guy, a mentor of mine, Trey Johnson. So a guy that served in the 75th Ranger Regiment, who was now the recruiter for the University of Hawaii. I literally just knocked on his door. He was the first office that I walked into in the building, and he had his door opened, and he was like straight out of a movie poster. He was like this big, buff, blonde guy with like, a crew cut hair. And I said, hey, I want to sign up for the Army. And he kind of laughed at me, actually. And he sat me down. He called in the colonel who was in charge of the entire ROTC program. And I think I kind of threw him for a loop. I think that they thought that I was just, a little caught up in the emotions of the moment, that I didn't really know what I was getting into. Because the truth is, I didn't know what I was getting into. But yeah, they sat me down and they're like, hey, look, this is a huge commitment. You're signing up a 4-year contract with the federal government. Have you ever thought about being in the military before this? Which I had not. But I just thought, I'm a 21-year-old guy and I'm patriotic. I love my country. And I thought at the time that I knew what I was getting myself into. Obviously, time taught me that I didn't completely understand what I was getting myself into at the time. But I think a lot of young soldiers are like that. If 9/11 hadn't have happened, and people ask me this a lot, I'd probably still be in Hawaii is my guess. I probably would have graduated. I would have met somebody there, probably started to raise a family. I loved living in the islands, not just because I was living in my parents' condo, but I just loved the islands and I loved everything about it. I loved being outdoors. I loved the lifestyle. Even though Waikiki and Honolulu, it's like a city on a tropical island. No, I probably still would have been there. And I think I would have become a firefighter or a teacher or something along those, or, helping people in some way. I knew that it was going to be that.
So you join the Army?
Yeah, so I signed. So at that point, I was still a student, but I was now a student soldier. So I signed a commitment to where I was going to finish my degree. So I had another year and a half to earn my college degree. So I still did that. But now every morning I was doing military training. So I basically became part of the Reserve Officer Training Corps at the University of Hawaii. And then I commissioned at the end of 2023. So I earned my college degree. And then the very next day, I commissioned as a second lieutenant in the Army, reported to Fort Benning, Georgia on my birthday, which is kind of an interesting little side note. So January 3rd, 2004, I reported to Fort Benning to basically check into the military school that I was going to. So as an infantry officer, at the time, you went to a 6-month course called Infantry Officer Basic Course. So you basically, as an officer in the infantry, you spend a whole year training. So they send you to this Infantry Officer Basic Course. They send you to airborne school where you jump out of airplanes. They send you to other specialty schools. So I basically spent a year at Fort Benning just going to all these different schools. I went to the U.S. Army Ranger School, graduated from Ranger School, and just spent basically the year there training.
So can you kind of sum up that experience, being in combat, what you took away from that?
You have to separate the day-to-day experience of combat and war with kind of the political piece. In terms of the actual experience, it was 11 months. And the way I describe it is there are days, hours, and weeks of monotony. Just nothing happening. You're driving around, you're meeting with people, nothing's happening. And then one day something blows up. And one day somebody shoots at you. And it wasn't the traditional warfare of the past where, okay, there's bad guys over on that hill and they're shooting on us. Okay, so let's go attack those bad guys. And they're wearing a uniform and I'm wearing a uniform. And it's not like, the Nazis versus the Americans and, Band of Brothers style. It was a different kind of war. It's an unconventional guerrilla war where we're fighting people that are wearing civilian clothes and they consider us occupiers. And some of them like us, some of them don't. So there was a lot of different kind of political considerations that went into it. We worked with the Iraqi police. We also had to figure out whether they were corrupt or whether they were secretly spies or whether they were out to get us. And so you had to really think about every single variable. You had to really think on your feet. You had to really understand all these different nuances and different relationships, the people that you're working with, whether they are in fact your friends or whether they're not your allies. And then in terms of the actual combat, of course, there's nothing that can prepare you for combat. There's nothing that can prepare you for being in a vehicle that blows up and flying through the air and landing upside down and thinking you're going to die, or being shot at or taking lives in combat. These are not things that you're prepared for. And these are not things that you understand until they actually happen. And then once you're in that situation, then you can take time and take stock of what you've actually been through and what you've experienced and what you've done. So yeah, it's very surreal. A lot of times I look back on my combat experience. I did 2 deployments. One was combat, one was a NATO peacekeeping mission. So I got to see both sides of the kind of the military experience. But yeah, it's definitely not something that you're prepared for. And you don't really realize when you're doing it. It takes time after the fact to kind of, get through it all and really understand it. So
how did it change you?
Like anything that you go through in life changes you. Any trauma changes you. It made me grow up. I was no longer the rich kid from San Marino who thought he was a tough guy or who was not focused or lackadaisical. So I shed any last ounce of immaturity. It made me see myself and my life outside of the construct that I grew up in. So it made me realize that I could go be or do anything, that I didn't have to be the commercial real estate or attorney from LA and do what all my buddies were doing, that I could go chart my own path and that I could go strike out on my own and I could do anything. I think all of those things. Yeah.
So, if you're a person in high school and you're considering the military,
Yeah.
because you don't know what to do, it seems like another option.
Sure.
I don't want to go to college, maybe the military, or even if you're in college and, now what do I do? Who is it for? Like, who should pursue that? Because I think the military can be a really great experience.
Yeah, it's a great question. So, there's, 250 million, people in our country right now. Less than 1% serve in the armed forces. And so historically, the armed forces have been for two groups of people: low income, disadvantaged. This is like the way out, right? I'm going to go right after I graduate high school. I'm going to the Marine Corps and I'm going to get,
Right.
food, and I'm going to get shelter, and I'm going to get clothes, and I'm going to get medical, and I'm leaving my pudong town, right? So there's that. Individuals that have, found themselves in, legal situations. Hey, I got arrested, right? The kind of, this is your last option kind of deal historically, right, that we've heard about. Another huge swath is people who come from military families. The vast majority of the people that I served with came from military families. Father served, mother served, uncle served. And so there's like this whole subcategory of Americans who come from, military families. In terms of today, I would say there's two different things to consider. Number one, is there a war going on? That's kind of a big one, because if you sign up for the military when there's two raging world, kind of conflicts going on, then you're pretty sure you're going to deploy. You're going to go somewhere for 12 to 16 months, and that might be not the best option for somebody. So I would say, is there a conflict going on? Your branch of service really matters. Are you going to be in the Air Force? Are you going to be in the Navy? Are you going to be in the Army? There's even options like National Guard and reserves versus active duty. So you could do that here locally. I mean, at the end of my military career, I was in the California Army National Guard. I was working here out of Azusa, and that's where in Ontario as well. And then I would also say, what do you want to get out of it? The average person serves active duty in the military for only about 6 or 8 years, and then they get out and then they go continue their life as a civilian. So are you going to be a lifer? Are you going to serve 20 years and get your pension in your early 40s and then, go do another career? Or are you going to serve for 4 years and then go use your GI Bill and get money for college? And so all of those things, I think, go into it. And yeah, it's definitely not for everybody. Just know what you're getting into. And this is not a fly by the seat of your pants. You're making a 4-year commitment to, and you give up a lot of yourself. I mean, they strip you down to build you up in the military. That's the whole purpose of basic training. That's the whole purpose of most military schools. It's no longer about the me and the I, it's about the us.
So you get out of the military, or you don't get out, you come home.
At that point, Iraq was kind of calming down and Afghanistan was really heating up.
Right.
Significant combat. Another guy that I served with in the University of Hawaii ROTC, who was the grade below me, he had just been killed in Afghanistan. Unfortunately, a notorious, famous story. He was on some random hilltop in the middle of nowhere in some random valley in Afghanistan with a platoon of guys. Their position got overrun by 300, enemy fighters, and he was unfortunately killed. And so I thought, okay, if I re-up, I'm going to go do my captain's career course, and they're going to send me to Afghanistan to be a light infantry company commander in '08 or '09. So at that point, I didn't think that I was going to survive that deployment. I thought that I was going to get sent out there and then I was going to be killed in some random valley. Like 3 of my friends had already, out of my class of 22, had already been killed from the University of Hawaii. So that was kind of the big moment for me. I didn't think I had too many more. My 9 lives, I used up about 5 of them in Iraq. And I thought, man, if I deploy out to Afghanistan, I might not make it home. I did not re-up. So I basically decided to get out of active duty. In '07, I was activated to go respond to I don't know if you remember, in '07, there was a bunch of wildfires down in San Diego County.
Right.
Escondido, all that area. So I was brand new to my unit and I literally arrived there. Within a week, the fires happened and we got federally activated as the National Guard. And I was put in charge of leading these group of guys from Inglewood, where I was stationed, down to San Diego to help the wildfires. Because of that federal deployment, they kind of figured out who I was. And so they offered me a company commander position for a second deployment. So that second deployment was from '08 to '09. And I deployed as part of a NATO peacekeeping mission to the former Yugoslavia. So Serbia, the Southern Republic of Serbia, broke away to form its own country called Kosovo or Kosovo. And so I was sent there as part of a NATO peacekeeping mission as part of the California Army National Guard to help. It was known as K4. K4 was the name of the mission. So went for my second deployment, spent a year at a place called Camp Bonsteel in Kosovo. And that was the end of my military service. And so I had already at that point done, it was just under 8 years was my contractual obligation. So at that point, that's when my military service ended.
So that's a lot.
Yeah, it's a lot.
So now it had to be, was it anticlimactic? Did you sit there and go, now what? What comes next?
It's funny that I needed the second deployment. When I came back from my first deployment, the typical PTSD, a lot of people ask me about PTSD and, PTSD, it's different for everyone. Anyone that goes through any trauma, car crash, losing a loved one, major disappointments in your life, physical trauma, you deal with it differently. For me, PTSD was, what do I do now? Like I was 25 years old. I was in charge of $30 million worth of equipment, 48 soldiers, life or death situations all day long, physical combat. Then I go on this next deployment. I'm in charge of 180 guys. I'm sitting in all these like important council meetings. The Kosovo declared their independence as a country from Serbia during that time. Huge political moment in the world. And I'm like on the border of Serbia and Kosovo, like doing these big talks with the Serbian army to ensure that there's no like border riots and all this crazy stuff. And then you just come home and you're out and you hang up the uniform. At that point, I'm 29 years old. I have a college degree and I have a tremendous amount of combat experience. Then it's also like, now what do I do? Right? And what am I going to go be a cop? Like, how do these skills that I've learned translate into the civilian world? And also at that point, you've experienced so much and it's hard for everybody. And there's no handbook. There's no. And there's no one there that can tell you, oh, hey, you should do this. A lot of people just figured, oh, he knows what he's doing or he'll figure it out. Meanwhile, internally, I was like, I've no freaking clue what I'm doing and I have no idea what I'm doing. So that's when you get into that phase of like, okay, now, what's next? And I definitely went through that.
So take us through that. Because I think it doesn't even have to be military. You could be in a job for a while and think, this is not what I wanted to do.
No.
Or that job somehow comes to an end or you get laid off. And then, I have these skills and everybody assumes these are really great skills and you were in the military and you did this.
Yeah.
And so you should just be able to land the next thing.
Yeah, it is the moment of where, since there's no playbook and there's no one that could really mentor you, it's not like I had an uncle, that served or that could give me all this information. And I tended to be someone that didn't really reach out to, mentor type figures. I was more of a lone wolf with regards to that. I always figured that I could figure things out on my own and I didn't need a lot of people kind of guiding me. I think initially you learn through failure. I made some bad decisions after my first deployment. I was, drinking too much. I was not really focused on, I was still getting over my combat experience. And so I had a brief failed marriage. I was married literally for 3 months, typical like army story of like your first bad marriage kind of thing. And again, alcohol was way too big in my life at the time. And so I think it started with me deciding, okay, what do I not want to do? Like, okay, I knew I didn't want to be in an office. I didn't want to be some businessman that's just selling things or like, I knew it came back to my childhood where I knew I wanted to help people. I always knew that I wanted to do something to help people. I just didn't know what, and I knew what I didn't want to do. I think sometimes you have to look at it through the not of, oh my gosh, there's so many decisions and I can't decide. It's like a vending machine. And like when you go to a vending machine, there's something you for sure know you don't want. It's like, oh, I don't want that ding dong. Like I hate ding dongs. I'm not going to touch those. So maybe focus initially, I think, on the things you don't want to do. And that will kind of start to shave some of that stuff away. And, I think you also have to look at your life across like all facets. So like at the time, I was great physical shape, emotionally and mentally not doing great, still working through the PTSD stuff. Financially, I was okay because I had money for my deployments and that kind of thing. And then personally, in terms of my personal life, that needed a little bit of retooling and working. And so kind of looking at all of those different things. How did I fall into my current line of work is just by sheer luck. So because I was injured in combat, I initially got into emergency medicine. So after my second deployment, I thought, I want to help people. I want to be a nurse. So I wanted to work in an ER and I wanted to be a nurse. I wanted to be that guy that was there like helping people right when you're the most injured. And so I did my certified nurse assistant. So I became a CNA. I became an EMT, so an emergency medical technician. And I was going to go through the prerequisites to go to nursing school because that was kind of my next big idea. But in the meantime, I mean, I spent about a year just like figuring it out. I worked at a gym. I literally worked at the graveyard shift at a gym just so I could like not be around people and kind of clear my head. And so I gave myself some time to just kind of figure it out. So yeah, I was doing my prereqs. I worked as an EMT briefly. I was a certified nurse assistant. And I was doing all my prereqs. That took me back to community college. So here I am now, 30 years old, going to Pasadena City College. I'm like the old man in these classes, and I have to do all of my science prereqs because, of course, I was an English major and I didn't do any of that stuff. So here I am taking microbiology, physiology, and I'm like, what am I doing? Number one, these kids are way smarter than me. I'm like barely getting through some of these classes, and these were all prereqs to nursing school. And I'm like, dang, like, is this a good decision? So I think a lot of with decision making, again, it's like, what are you not good at? Like, instead of thinking about all the things you want to be and like all the things you're great, what are you really bad at? And then so let's immediately kind of push that off to the side. And that's what I figured out. I'm like, I suck at math. I'm terrible at physiology. And how am I going to be a nurse if I can barely pass microbiology? So that was kind of an aha moment for me where I'm like, oof, maybe I should pivot. So I remember I was living in an apartment, just recently ended my very brief marriage and living by myself, me and my cat. And I just, again, much like my decision to go to Hawaii, I couldn't sleep. I was up late at night and I just went online and I just put my resume on monster.com, if you can believe it. And I just put it under nonprofits. And I was just like, boop, press send. And I'm like, okay. Like I took that first step and I was still going to school and I was still, I'd committed myself to what I was going to be doing. Woke up the next morning and had emails from people. One of the emails I got was from a mentor of mine, a gal named Pat, and she worked for a large nonprofit in Los Angeles. And she said, hey, I saw your resume and I see that you have a lot of leadership experience. Have you ever worked with people with disabilities? And I remember sitting there being like, oh man, no, I have not. I have no experience. I've never worked with children. I've never worked with people with disabilities. I've never worked with the elderly. I thought maybe animals. I thought, something nonprofit based, but I had no idea. So she goes, well, if you're interested, here's the job description. Why don't you come out for an interview? And one of those people that interviewed me is my current business partner. So that was that next kind of aha moment where I met, her name is Shannon, and she's my business partner. She hired me. So she was my first boss. And I went to work in the field of supporting people with disabilities. I became a direct support professional. So there I was, 30 years old, making about $12 an hour, had this distinguished military career behind me, already had a bachelor's degree, had all this military training. And there I was showing up for my first day of work out in Westwood, t-shirt, shorts, baseball cap on, making $12 an hour. And I remember this, the first day that I showed up there was at an apartment building and all of these neurodivergent young adults were living there attending this program. And I spent a day there and I was like, this is it. This is what I'm going to do now. And this is what I'm going to spend the rest of my life doing. And so, yeah, for me, it was like those two email, the application to Hawaii, the email on monster.com, and then getting the response back and then actually taking that leap of faith and going, I could have blown off that interview. I could have not gone out to Culver City. I could have just been like, whatever. But there was a fire that was burning within me to like do something, like whatever it is, just go do something, And so I knew that was like this internal clock that's always been inside of me of like, just go do something, just figure it out. You'll figure it out along the way, but just go do something. So yeah, so that's what I did.
So there's two things I want to touch on. One, the first thing you mentioned, kind of that process of elimination.
Yeah.
And figuring out what you're not good at.
Yes.
So, I am all for, you should follow your passion and what you're excited and interests you.
Yeah.
But if you're not good at it, don't do it.
Yeah.
It's not going to happen. I love music and I love, the idea of a composer.
Yep.
I am tone deaf. I have no musical talent.
Yeah.
I could never go in that direction.
Yeah.
Right. So I think balancing that, right? Realizing I am not good at science.
No.
I can't do this.
And you have to be realistic, right? And maybe we have friends and loved ones that can tell us these things like, hey, you're probably not going to be an astronaut, right? We have this impression of like, oh, you can be anything. Can you? Really?
Yeah, no.
No. That's a scale. And there's a scale of aptitude and skill and desire and time, all of these different things that go into that equation. And so you're doing yourself a disservice if you're telling other people or yourself, oh, you could go be anything in this world. No, let's kind of define that a little bit more. And let's kind of narrow that down. We're not in the business of crushing souls, but we're also in the business of being realistic. Too many young people that I talk to, especially a lot of my staff now are UCLA, they're like these super talented UCLA undergrads, they just can't decide. It's not about, they're just like, oh, I'm going to go to med school. I'm going to do this. They just can't make a decision. And so there's like that paralysis through overanalysis that kicks in, where if you're just a little more upfront with yourself and being like, okay, realistically, that's not for me.
Right.
You're going to just save so much time, I think, on the journey. So,
Right.
yeah.
And then just doing something. Like you said, I just needed to do something.
Yes.
It paid $12 an hour. It was maybe not anything that you thought would fit or you were comfortable with, but you went out and you did it.
Yeah. And that's whole like job versus career. I've always had a really strong work ethic. I get that from my father. And so I get anxious, like if I'm just sitting at home. I get anxious if I'm not doing something. Again, I have this like clock inside of me that's ticking down of like all the hours and minutes I have left in this planet. And it's like, it just burns within me. I get that everyone's different, but I always knew whether it was a gym, whether it was that job as a direct support professional, I was going to do something. Even if it wasn't a career, I was going to go work 40 hours a week at a job. And I think that that's healthy and that's necessary. I see young people today or even older people where it's like, they don't really work and they just kind of, I'm just like, oh man, you're wasting so much time. And like, it's so valuable. So yeah, you have to do something.
Yeah.
You got to get out there and you got to do something.
And even things that you don't think, well, that's not what I signed up for. That has nothing to do with the degree I got, or I don't know what to do. And, I think skills are transferable.
Absolutely.
I mean, there's all kinds of things that you build in anything, working at Nordstrom in retail.
Yeah.
There's a lot to be said and learned from customer service and dealing with those kinds of things. And so again, just doing something. So you get this job.
Yeah.
And what were you doing? Like, what was the job?
Yeah. So the job was, the company that I was working for, large provider in Orange County in LA, teaching life skills to people with developmental disabilities. So autism spectrum disorder, cerebral palsy, Down syndrome, intellectual diagnosis, people who identify as neurodiverse, basically. And this company was doing what was known as independent and supported living. So life skills, anything that is not academic or employment, we were responsible for. The wild thing is there's like very little training for this job. It's funny, like you need a license to cut hair, to cut nails. You need a license to groom dogs. You need a license to take care of the elderly. The world of supporting people with disabilities is kind of a free-for-all. There's no state or federal mandate for like training or for certification. And so I had relatively little training, and all of a sudden I was put in an apartment with 4 young men with developmental disabilities who were attending a post-secondary program at UCLA. So it's a program that basically mimics the college experience for people who would not otherwise be able to get into a 2 or 4-year university. So it's a certificate-based program. They take classes, they get internships, and we do the social recreation, the life skills, and the residential part of that. So imagine I was kind of like an RA. I was responsible for this apartment and like, where's our chore charts and who's doing laundry and we have to go shopping and we have to clean up and just teaching all basic life skills, basically.
That is awesome.
Yeah.
So you did that for how long?
I did that for 3 years. So kind of another pivot point for me is that after the first year, my current business partner went on maternity leave. So she was going to have her 3rd son and she was my boss at the time. And after 1 year, she left on maternity leave and I was offered her interim position. So they basically said, hey, you did a really great job this year. We're going to offer you the manager position while Shannon is out on maternity leave. So I, of course, took that position. So then I became a manager after my 2nd year of this company. And I did that for 2 years total. So I was there for 3 years. We decided to leave. Basically, I remember approaching her and just saying, look, we're working for this massive company. They have offices in Orange County, LA County. We weren't necessarily aligned with the core values of the organization and just the leadership. They'd been doing it a really long time. They were a very well-established company, but we just thought that we could bring a fresh set of eyes and a different mindset to this type of work. And I'm just one of those people that at that point I knew that I wanted to work for myself. Like I knew that I had the aptitude and the ability to run my own company and that I didn't necessarily need to answer to somebody else. And so part of it was I felt a little constricted under that, in that framework, and I needed to have my own place to go do my own thing and make my own decisions. And I just thought that we could do it in a different way and we could bring a fresh set of eyes. So I remember I approached my manager at the time. Well, so she came back from maternity leave and I was like, hey, what do you think if we go start our own company? Like we could do this. Let's leave. Let's start our own company and let's do this in our own liking. And so that's what we did. I resigned from my company, as did my business partner, and we started our company, Level Up Solutions. And so that was 10 years ago last February.
So what advice would you give someone either just out of high school or starting college or just graduated and just not sure what to do?
Yeah, this is a good one. And I really meditated on this whole concept. I have a couple of different like core belief systems that I kind of operate off of. The first is in life, you're either swimming, treading water, or drowning. At any day, any moment, any situation, anything, okay? Swimming swimming, treading water, or drowning. Okay. So you need to look at your life and you need to determine, what am I doing right now? Am I just treading water and just like doing this job and just kind of complaining and just like not really making that next dynamic leap to whatever comes next, right? Am I just fully drowning where like my life is falling apart and I'm just like completely in the gutter? Or am I swimming? Like, what are you doing? So that's the first thing, is like being honest about that. Like, so many people I talk to, it's like they're not aware. Like, they lack so much awareness of even being able to rate themselves of like, where are you at in your life? Like, it's cool to say you're drowning, but at least what are you doing to make yourself better, right? So I think that's the big one. This whole idea of living in the past versus the present versus the future. It's another core belief system of mine. If we spend too much time in the past, we have regrets and we're sad, right? All the things we should have done, all the decisions we should have made, all that stuff. If we think too much about the future, it makes us anxious, right? Anxiety is fear of the unknown, of like, oh my gosh, what's going to happen? We spend 90% of our time worrying about things that don't even end up happening, right? So I think that's a big one as well, of being present, living in the day-to-day moment, not being distracted, not worrying too much about the past or the future. So as a young person, I think that's huge. Life goes really fast. And so another thing that I would tell any young person is, I know that you're like, oh, I'm still young. Yeah, well, I still feel like I'm 20. And here I am, I'm 45 years old. And the last 20 years went by like that. And I talk to my parents who are 80. They say the same thing. They still feel like in their brain, they're in their 30s, right? So I think that's a huge thing of like, it does go by fast. And so you have to have goals and you have to have a plan, right? You need to sit down every day and do something to better yourself, because otherwise all of a sudden you're going to be 25, then you're going to be 30, and then you're going to be 30, and then you're going to start feeling sorry for yourself, or you're going to have all these regrets and anger and resentment and all these other negative feelings and emotions. And so I think that's a big one as well. Another big thing I talk about is like the body keeps score. So whatever you're doing, you need to take care of your body, right? So spiritual, physical, mental, emotional, you have to be hitting on all cylinders, right? There was a period of my life where I was a functioning alcoholic, and I would get up every day and I'd go crush a 12-hour workday, and then I'd go home and I'd drink, and I felt like crap the next day, but I'd get up and I'd do it again, right? I was not hitting on all of those facets of life that I needed to be the best version of myself. So you have to really get your life in order, all of those different facets of your life. And I'm not saying you have to go to church every day or you have to go run Ironman marathons or anything like that, but you have to have a really good grasp of who you are as a person, what your belief systems are, this whole thing about your purpose in life. It is important to know where you came from, why you're here, and what your purpose is, until you can solve those big picture questions of like, where do we come from? What is the purpose of this world? Why am I here? Do I believe in God? Do I not believe in God? I truly think that you have to reconcile those big questions as a young person, because I think that if you don't reconcile those big questions, then that could slow you down in terms of the minutia, the little things. So I'm a firm believer in that as well. You know, my dad's old quote, whatever you are, be a good one, or whatever you do, do it well, I think is another one. And then just like the way that you live your life, I'm a firm believer in being in the real world. So I'm not video game guy. I'm not social media guy. I'm not those headsets, the virtual reality. Right. The world is an incredible, beautiful, living, breathing place. And I think that the more time you spend outdoors, the more time you connect with nature, the more time you work on making the world a better place, instead of sitting in your basement or playing video games and like engaging in all of these like keyboard wars and all that other stuff, that you're going to get the benefits of that and you're going to be a better person for it. And so I see that that's really hard with young people, especially. It's like, okay, well, you complain about the world. What are you doing to make it a better place? And what are you doing today to get outside and help the world, help people, and just be part of nature and all that good stuff? So those are some, but
that's incredible. No, yeah. That was great. When we talked about this prior to, sitting down and talking today, the idea, and I think this goes with a lot of what you just said, is, after high school, people should have to do service.
Oh, yes.
Right? Young people, everybody out there should do a year or two of service.
Yeah.
Whatever that may be, right? Military or volunteering or Peace Corps. Do you want to talk about that a little bit more?
Yeah, for sure. There's two things I think we're just incredibly lucky, right? So since really the founding of our country, we haven't had to face conflict on our soil. Pearl Harbor, I get, that was Hawaii. But for the most part, we are surrounded by two huge, vast oceans that enables us to live in America and not feel as though men are going to kick down our door, murder us, take our possessions like the rest of the world has to deal with. And so as a result of that, we develop kind of this generational complacency of just like, everything's fine, like it's all good. So I think that's part of it. There's this graph where after wars, the birth rate goes up exponentially, right? So it's like called, the soldier bump, because they all come home and they want to have kids and stuff. And then for any country that does not experience conflict or war, that the birth rate plummets over time. So we look at right now the birth rate of every major, Japan birth rate plummeting, the US birth rate plummeting. So it's those two concepts, put together. And then also that look at our American lives, right? It's like, what is struggle to us? Yeah, I get that there's marginalized populations. There's all these things that the social media wars and all these like the stuff that's going on in social kind of stuff. But when you look at like what it means to be an American, how do you define that? And I think that we are just kind of in such a complacent place where we just are entitled. We just think that, my life is going to be amazing and I deserve this and I need this. And I also think that we lack a certain amount of, to give back. Less than 1% serve in the armed forces. And I'm not saying you have to serve in the military, but if there was a portal after high school for 1 to 2 years for every single American to do some sort of service-based deal, military, working in conservation corps, Peace Corps, environmental stuff, firefighting, the elderly, people with disabilities, preschool and childcare settings, hospital settings, I think that it would create this mindset as a society that it's not just about me.
Right.
And that I need to contribute to this vast fabric of our culture and society. I need to complain less. I need to do more. And I need to just grow up a little bit. That was the saving grace for me, was the military. I didn't grow up until I went to Fort Benning as a 24-year-old. That should have happened 6 years prior. And maybe I wouldn't have gotten in trouble in San Luis Obispo or made these bad mistakes. And so, I just wish that there was a way to do that. I know that that's really hard in a society like ours, and you can't force me to do anything, but I wish that there was some sort of system, because I think that that would really grow us up as a society and make us really realize how great we have it, how much we should, respect our land and respect each other and find that common ground instead of being so antagonistic. And so we're so tribal right now. And it's like we define our existence about the ways that are separating us as opposed to like our collective consciousness and understanding. Right. And so.
Yeah. And I think getting us to talk to people who are different than us,
Oh.
putting us in those situations where you feel uncomfortable,
Yes.
right? Those are the experiences that make you grow and,
Yes.
and then help you decide what to do later on. So I 100% agree with that.
Yeah.
And, all right. My last question.
Yes.
What would you tell your 21-year-old self today?
Wow. What would I tell my 21-year-old self? I would say, don't be so hard on yourself. You're going to make mistakes. You're going to have failures. There's going to be moments of doubt, imposter syndrome. You're going to screw things up. You're going to say the wrong thing. You're going to do the wrong thing. You're going to not be the best version of yourself. And so just make sure that that's not an everyday thing. We all make mistakes. So that'd be the first one is, don't beat yourself up too bad. I would also say it will work out if you do the work. So I'm not one of those like, oh, don't worry. People have said that, oh, it'll work out. And I'm like, really? Will it? No, I don't necessarily buy into that mindset. It'll work out if you put yourself in a position to have options and be successful and have tools and resources. And so I would also say it might not work out. And so what you need to do is you need to figure out what your goals are and come up with steps to accomplish those things and then put yourself in the best position to succeed. And then I would also say have fun on the journey, because life goes very, very fast. And before you know it, you're going to be, 45 years old and you're going to think, wow, that was quick, because 21 to 45 went by like a flash. Yeah. And so I would say, take time every day to appreciate being alive. I think I read this recently where, just the odds of being born as a human being is just like a trillion and trillion to one, right? And so just being here. And so just be thankful. Be thankful that you're on this planet, you're breathing air, that you can experience this world and you can be a part of it. Yeah.
Michael, thank you so much. I mean, again, I've known you your whole life. I learned stuff about you today I had no idea.
Yeah. Well, thank you for doing this. And obviously it's a great honor to be asked to participate in this. And I can't wait to see the amazing things that come out of this project. And yeah, let me know. I'm always available if you want me to ever to come on again, or if you ever want to connect for anything else.
That's awesome. Thank you.
All right.
If any of today's conversations got you thinking about your own path, please take a moment to subscribe, leave a review, or share the episode with someone who might need to hear it. You can find more stories, resources, and ways to get involved at KeystoneNetwork.org or follow us on Instagram at PathFound Podcast. Whether you're navigating the unknown, making a pivot, or simply figuring it out one step at a time, just know you're not alone. The route may not be linear, but there's always a way forward. I'm Monica Argandonia, and I'll see you next week on PathFound.